Good morning, everyone. This is John Connett, City Manager in Hendersonville. I'd like to welcome our media and our citizens and anyone else who is tuning in this morning to hear from our police chief finalists. We have two finalists. Our first is Gerald Childress, and just a little quick format for this morning is we have 25 minutes to hear from the candidates. The first 5 minutes or so will be a candidate introduction, self-introduction, and we have questions from the news media for about 10 minutes, and then we'll then allow for 10 minutes of questions from our community. We have lots of questions that came in, so we prioritize those, and then we'll let the candidate close at the end. So we look forward to hearing from Mr. Childress this morning, and let the citizens get a look at our two finalists. So I'll turn it over to Gerald, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Mr. Connick. Thank you, everyone, for attending today. I'll first like to start off by giving you a little bit of background of myself. My full name is Gerald Ray Childress. I'm from Mooresville, North Carolina. I currently reside in Newton. I recently moved to Newton. I am married. I've been married for 20 years to my wife, Marcia. She is an RN with the Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina. We have one daughter. Her name is Bailey. She is 18 and a freshman at Lenoir-Rhyne University. As far as education, I received my undergrad degree in sociology from Lenoir-Rhyne. I received my master's degree from Methodist University in justice administration. I have attended administrative officer management program through NC State University, and I've also attended the University of Virginia the Leading Education and Developing program, as well as the FBI LEADA trilogy. Just some of the education that I've had. My work history: I've completed basic law enforcement training in 1995. I was hired with the Hendersonville Police Department soon after that in 1996. While in Huntersville, I obtained the rank of corporal, field training officer, and also worked in the criminal investigations division. In 2005, I transitioned to the Mooresville Police Department. I was hired straight in as a detective. And in that role, I obtained the rank of lieutenant and captain, supervising the criminal investigations unit. In 2012, I obtained the rank of major over patrol and served in that until 2017 when I was promoted to deputy chief. And I served as deputy chief until October 2019. And I currently am serving as a patrol officer with the Mooresville Police Department. My community activities: I'm a very active member of my church, where I, on occasion, am called upon to sing. I do teach Sunday school. I am a former head of our security and also a choir director. I'm a member of the Mooresville Lake Norman Exchange Club. That is a civic organization helping to improve the community through our programs of service. Programs of service are the youth in our community, community service, and also Americanism. And our national project is Stopping Child Abuse. I am a mentor in the Mooresville Graded School District, where I serve as a mentor to several of the students there. My affiliations as part of my duties as a deputy chief were affiliated with the North Carolina Police Execs Association, as well as the North Carolina Association of Chiefs of Police. I am a member of the North Carolina Homicide Investigator Association, where I did serve as president of that association in 2013 and 2014. I'm also a member of the Criminal Justice Honor Society, Alpha Phi Sigma chapter. Hobbies include anything outdoors, golfing, hunting, fishing. I also enjoy working out, but most importantly, spending time with my family is very important. So a little bit of background on myself and a little introduction about who I am.
So at this point, we'll move on to questions from the media. So Allison and Brian, if you'll help us with unmuting the media folks so that they can ask questions as they raise their hands.
Absolutely. If our media will use the raise hand feature, if you'd like to be called on, and we'll unmute you as your hands are raised. Mark, with Fox Carolina, you're unmuted.
Hey, hello, good morning, and congratulations. I guess you coming into a small community like this, I guess, what assets do you think you can bring and bring to the people that live there?
Yes. And working with the Mooresville Police Department, it's a community right outside of Charlotte. We have 47,000 residents there, and we continually have crime issues that spill out of Charlotte. I'm really versed in a lot of criminal activity as well as investigating those activities. I spent 14 years as an investigator, investigating everything from break-ins to homicide and murder cases. So I'm very well versed in that. I think I can bring my knowledge, my skills, and my abilities to the Hendersonville Police Department and continue the great traditions that have already been established here. So with my knowledge, my skills and abilities, my training, 25 years of law enforcement, I feel like that I have the necessary skills to continue the great traditions again that this agency has already have it in place.
Thank you.
Thank you for that question. Pete Zamplis with the Tribune. We're working on unmuting you.
There, can you hear me better?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Pete. Go ahead.
Okay. Tell me, for each of you, when you were on duty as a police officer on a time when a case when you used restraint, such as negotiating with a hostage situation, and also a time of valor during your time of duty.
That is a little bit hard for me to hear that question. I understood a time when I had to deal with a situation much like a hostage situation or a negotiation.
And Pete, this is John Connor. I think you said time of valor. Is that what you
Yeah,
said?
in other words, when you a time of bravado, a time when your life was on the line, and then also another time when you had to use your wit, such as with a hostage negotiation.
Yes, I am a former trained hostage negotiator, so I understand the concept of that. I would have to tell you about a story where we dealt with a gentleman who had made threats toward his family. He was armed inside of the residence. We responded to that particular call, negotiated with him for several hours. The event ended with him giving up and coming out of the residence. So we had to deal with also the neighbors, getting them secure and getting them safe. So I had to negotiate with him for several hours. As far as putting my life on the line, I think, you put on a uniform and a badge, you put your life on the line every day that you go to work. I have not necessarily had an experience where I've had to pull my firearm or to be in a situation where that was needed. I think I'm very well skilled on trying to de-escalate situations and trying to talk with folks. Again, being a negotiator, trained negotiator, that has come into play. But again, I think anytime you put on a uniform and a badge, you do put yourself in harm's way. It's something that is on your mind constantly, but you're there to do a job and you do it to the best of your ability.
Thank you for that question, Pete. Next, we have Laura Lowry with the Hendersonville Times News.
Good morning, and thank you for your time. So regarding your demotion, I read that there was an independent investigation prior to that. Was your demotion the result of any wrongdoing found in that investigation? And can you elaborate a little bit on that investigation?
Yes, I will. I'm sure there'll be some other questions about this, but I would like to state that there was an independent investigation that began in February of 2019. I was interviewed voluntarily in that investigation. At that time, I was told that I was, I had no complaints against me. I was not under investigation. I was there as a witness voluntarily. Subsequently, the chief of police was placed on administrative leave. And I was told at that time that I was collateral damage in this investigation, and that they would be seeking an outside chief to come in to fill the interim position. The interim chief elected to, when he came in, elected to restructure the command staff, and my position as deputy chief was dissolved, as well as two major positions. In August of 2019, an administrative report was requested based off of my April interview, voluntary interview. And it was based off of that administrative report that alleged certain accusations against me. Based on these accusations, I was issued a notice of demotion. I did follow the protocol and appealed in the appeal process, but unfortunately the demotion was upheld. I feel this demotion was extremely harsh, unwarranted, and politically driven. I remain loyal to the citizens of Mooresville and chose to stay and serve in a lesser capacity. So I was not a subject of an investigation. However, based on my interview in 2019 in April, an administrative report was initiated and accusations were made out of that, which led to my demotion. So I'm hoping that answered your question.
Thank you. Next, we have Bill Moss with the Lightning.
Thank you, Officer Childress. The previous question.
Bill, can I have you hold on one moment? Can you try to speak a little louder for us here? Thank you.
Okay. How about now, Allison?
That's a little better. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Officer Childress. So my question was similar to the previous question, but I haven't managed to understand either from reading reports of the various investigations of the department and your response, aside from your situation, what was the nature of the charges or the problems with the police chief at that time that resulted in what you characterize as the collateral damage to yourself?
Yes, the initial investigation was on a hostile work environment that was alleged by one of our employees. The hostile work environment also led into some hiring practices that our chief at the time was doing, which did not sit well with the rank and file. So hostile work environment, as well as some questionable hiring practices.
Thank you, sir.
Taylor, do you have any questions from WLOS?
Let me catch up here. You can continue on now.
Okay. If any other media, we probably have another room for one more question. If anyone from the media has one, please raise your hand. I see that we have an additional question from Laura with the Hendersonville Times News.
Can you elaborate on the accusations that were made against you that you mentioned?
I prefer not to get into specifics about that, it being a personnel matter. But I think what is important to know is that I have discussed this incident in detail with Mr. Connick, and I am still considered a valid candidate for this position.
Do we have any additional questions from the media before we move on to the next segment? Okay, I think we will transition into our community questions. First, we have a question submitted by Laura Bannister. Her question is, there will soon be a position in the city government whose responsibilities will include promotion of diversity and inclusion of people of color, as well as the LGBTQ community. How will you specifically address these needs in our area, given the growing and politically active minority population?
Yes. I am an advocate of our police department reflecting our community. Our community is made up of different races, different ethnicities, different thought processes, different ways of life. So I am an advocate of making sure that our police department does reflect the, our community. So any candidate comes in to be hired as a police officer here will have the same ability to be hired as long as they meet the qualifications. We don't discriminate against anyone. So everyone would have an opportunity to come to this department, to be a part of this department, be part of this community. And I would see that everyone gets their fair opportunity to do that.
Thank you. Our next question is a two-part question submitted by Kristen Martin. The first part is, how do you value the mental health of your officers and the community that they serve? Followed up by, how do you review the relationship between your officers and staff and the homeless population?
Thank you for the question. Part of the 21st century policing pillars is the wellness of officers. I think that is very important, the mental health of our officers. Our officers are dealing with more things this day and age than ever before. They're called upon to be wear different hats. They're called upon to be parents. They're called upon to be counselors. They're called upon to be clergy. It's very difficult time in this particular job. We do have an employment assistance program that assists with all kinds of needs, mental health needs, financial needs, whatever the case may be. So that is a program that I'm glad that the city has, and I would be promoting that program to any officer that would need that, or anyone identified, civilian staff, sworn staff, anything that we can do to help with the mental health. Again, I think it's very important. We place a lot of responsibility on officers to go out and do their jobs, as well as our telecommunicators. They're the first one to pick up the phone to answer those calls. And a lot of times they need some assistance after dealing with a really rough situation. Someone that's involved with CPR and they have to give instruction over the phone. Dealing with unfortunately, I've had to deal with two dispatchers that were working the night. One of our officers was shot and killed. Working with them to make sure that they're ready to come back to work and anything that they need as far as their mental health. So I do value the mental health of our policing, our civilian staff, and I want to make sure that we are doing everything we can at the police department to make sure that our folks are where they need to be and ready to work. As far as the relationship with the homeless, I think that was the second question. Homelessness is a very terrible thing that happens to folks. There are different circumstances that lead to that. I would do everything I could to try to work with different community organizations that we could help with that issue. I know that there are several organizations out there that can assist, whether that's different shelters for men and women. people in crisis, whatever the case may be, domestic situations where a wife and has to leave the husband due to domestic issues, finding them safe, safe places to go. So there's different forms of homelessness that we have to deal with. So I'm really willing to work with and find solutions to any type of homeless situation that we can find the solutions to.
Thank you. Our next question was submitted by Indian Jackson. She asks, Chief Blake confirmed there would be no over-policing once the new building is finalized. Can you guarantee this as well? And if so, how?
Over policing.
Gerald, if I may clarify, Indian, Gerald has not had a tour of the new facility yet. So the new facility is located in an area that has predominantly been an African-American neighborhood. It's on the fringe of the neighborhood in a commercial area that's in transition. So she's referring to an area that of the city where historically African-Americans have lived. So the concern of the community when we located a department there was over policing.
Okay. Well, I would assure that our men and women would be doing their jobs. Over policing, I don't consider that something that we would focus on. If there is crime in the neighborhood or if there's issues, quality of life issues that we need to address, we will be in those neighborhoods. We will address that. But we're not going to seek out and over police a certain population or a certain community. Everyone deserves the same type of treatment. Everyone deserves the same type of service. And it would be my job to make sure that we address and we treat people the way they need to be treated. My philosophy is what's important to you is important to us. And we want to make sure that we get into those communities, build partnerships outside of a call for service. A lot of times calls for service are, have a more of a enforcement type of mentality, whether you're getting pulled over on the side of the road or there's an officer responding to a domestic situation. But we want officers to be able to have time to get out of the car and build partnerships with the community and potentially, get to know the officer on first name basis and the officer know the community members on first name basis. But, over policing, that is not in my mindset for this agency. We will treat everyone with respect. I'm an advocate of fair and impartial policing. So I do not think that over policing would be an issue.
Thank you. Our next question was submitted by Beth Stang. Her question reads, what is your opinion of a citizen advisory board to the police department?
Okay. I have not been an advocate of the Citizen Advisory Board. I think that with our policies and our procedures, that we have enough here that we can police ourselves. I understand with the way the climate is that some folks may see that there's a need for a citizen's oversight. However, I would not be an advocate of that. I would be willing to sit down and talk with folks and share ideas that they may have. But as I sit here today, I've never been a proponent of that. I know that there are some agencies that do have a citizens oversight board that can come in and look at things, but a lot of those things are personnel related, which restricted information that can be shared. But at the same time, I think that if we do our jobs correctly and we hold ourselves accountable, there would really be no need for a citizens oversight board.
Thank you. The next question was submitted by Harold Hellickson. He asks, how would you evaluate the need for possible anti-bias or prejudice training of the Hendersonville Police Force? The same for de-escalation training.
Yes.
If a need is recognized, what programs would you recommend be undertaken?
Right. Well, as far as de-escalation, the CIT training, which I have had, I'm an advocate of all of our officers having CIT training. And if I'm not mistaken, all of the officers here at the Hendersonville Police Department receive CIT, which is critical incident training in the first year of their employment. And part of that training is learning how to deal with issues, people dealing with mental health issues, and being able to analyze that and deal with that on a more less than an enforcement type of a manner. As far as bias goes, I think we all know that we have intrinsic and extrinsic biases. It's important for us to understand that. I've had training in that. I would be looking to bring that training here as well, so we're all aware of what our biases are and how to deal with those biases. But we want to make sure that, again, I go back to philosophy is what's important to you is important to us. If that type of training needs to be done here, then we'll seek out that training and make sure that our officers are treating everybody equally. There would be no special treatment or over policing or anything like that. It's part of my idea also that we seek a CLIA accreditation, and that is the Commission on Law Enforcement accreditation. And basically, it helps us set guidelines for our policies that put us in the gold standard of policing. And I think that would also help. There's a lot of training out there in that line of thought for CLIA training and for CLIA accreditation, dealing with biased thoughts and fair and impartial policing. And those are things that I would be looking to implement along with the CLIA process.
Thank you. We have about time for one more minute. We're going to combine this question because it was submitted from multiple people. Both Beth Stang and Caroline Gunther ask similar questions, but basically, what would your approach be to working with community groups, and how do you plan to engage and collaborate with the community?
Well, anybody who knows me knows I'm a community person. I have an office that I will sit in and do daily work, but I want to get out in the community, and I will be seen in the community. My approach is being a person that is approachable, a person that you can come up to and share your ideas, share your thoughts, share your concerns, and be genuine that I will take those concerns and those issues to heart. Dealing with and talking with our command staff here, that is something that they also want to be a part of, is getting in the community. It's really helped me being part of the Mooresville Lake Norman Exchange Club and the events in which we do annually, almost on a monthly basis, getting into the community, whether it be with parades, Veterans Day celebrations, Martin Luther King, Juneteenth, a lot of different celebrations that take place in the community. You will see me there. I'm just not going to send a patrol officer. You will see me at these community events, community meetings. I know COVID has some restrictions on that, but you'll see me. I'm out there. I'm interested to hear what you have to say, and any improvements that you would recommend, I'll take those to heart and see what we can do. But I'm very community oriented, and you'll definitely see me out there.
So thank you, Gerald, very much. And I'd like to thank the media and our citizens who participated. We reviewed all the questions and tried to provide questions that a lot of folks asked today. So I want to thank you for your time. This is just one step in the process, in a long process. So we'll continue to evaluate what we've seen today and the feedback we've gotten. So I would like to thank again the public and the media, and we will recess now and return right at about 11:15. So be back at 11:15. Thank you. I'd like to welcome back our media and our citizens and other folks who are tuning in by Zoom. At this point, I'm glad to welcome Blair Myhand as our second candidate. We will follow the same format as we did previously, where Blair will have an opportunity to introduce himself. 5 minutes for that. We have 10 minutes of media questions, 10 minutes of community question, and if there's time at the remaining, there'll be closing from the candidates. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Blair.
All right. Thank you, John. Of course, like the manager said, my name is Blair Myhand. It's spelled just like it sounds, right? So it's my hand instead of your hand. I'm sure there are a lot of questions that the media have and the public would like to ask of me. So I'll keep my introductory very brief, but I will tell you that I have been a police officer for over 26 years now. I started my career with the Metropolitan Police Department in Washington, D.C., where I spent my first 11 years there in the city. Ended up moving to North Carolina after a stint in Afghanistan and joined the Apex Police Department, where I had the fortune of learning some great leadership from my former chief and mentor, Jack Lewis, and I rose through the ranks and never thought I wanted to be a police chief. But once I got to captain and kind of got working more closely with him, I thought that was something that I wanted to do. And in May of 2017, I went to Clayton, North Carolina, to be the police chief there. And so I am married to a wonderful woman. Her name is Nana, and we have a 12-year-old Sheltie, and we are happy to be here and eager to answer questions and let everybody get to know a little bit more about me. So I think that's my intro.
Thank you. We will first move to questions from the media. We have Taylor with WLOS if you'd like to kick us off.
Right, Mr. Myhand, could you first give us a little bit more background as to your core values as an officer and as a leader?
Yeah, so I very much pride myself on integrity and honesty. Those are very important to me. Know that maybe there's some questions about things going on, but I raised my right hand and said I wanted to do this job, and I was going to uphold an oath, and I was going to abide by that, and I try to live by that every day. And that's the most important thing to me. I want to walk away at the end and be able to look myself in the mirror and know that I've maintained my integrity and my honesty and my trustworthiness. And that's what I try to do every day.
As far as your previous career, I know you said you were chief. Or can you give us any more background as to any issues that you may have had in the past that people may have questions about in our community?
So, I'm sure that folks are aware that I'm on a non-disciplinary administrative leave from the town of Clayton right now. It is an ongoing situation. If you're going to ask me why am I on leave, to be honest, I can't tell you, because the city or the town has not been forthcoming with that. But this is, the winds have shifted there, and we're not blowing in the same direction. And this is not a one-off issue with Chief Myhand. There's a much bigger picture going on, and I would encourage people to maybe take a step back and look at a bigger picture with the town over the past 6 months or maybe a year to maybe get a more full picture of what's really going on.
And because this question was asked the previous candidate, how do you feel about a community oversight committee as far as policing? I know when you consider this past year, some people may have some feelings about that. So what would you say to that?
Oversight with police is kind of a 4-letter word. It's a scary thought, but I think that the community has a real stake in how they're policed, right? They're the ones who are on the receiving end of that. So I think there is a place where the community, whether you call it an oversight committee or an advisory committee, I'm not sure, the terminology, but I know myself have thought about it. A lot of my peers have thought about how we give the community a little bit more voice in saying how they are policed by their department, because you don't have a choice who answers the 911 call unless you say, well, I'm going to move to a different city because I think that that's a better police department, right? You really don't have much say so in that. So I think there's a real value in allowing that to happen. You can do that with strategic planning, policy review, revision, but having those partnerships with the community is I think essential, and it's never been more highlighted than maybe in the last year. So it's probably something that law enforcement has resisted for a long time. Again, it kind of has a stigma with it, but I think that law enforcement leaders today really recognize that we need to plug back in with our communities and let them have some say so and direction in how we operate.
We'll turn it over.
Thank you, Taylor. Next, we have Mark with Fox Carolina.
Hey, good almost afternoon. With you being currently on administrative leave and the first candidate being demoted, what would you like to say to the residents of the city and the area that would instill some faith into their police force, that they've hired the right person?
Well, I tell you, Mark, I'd like to say a whole lot of things, but that's probably not what you want to hear. What I would tell you, everybody that's paying attention to this, is that, I think the city has done a very extensive search. I know Gerald Childress, the other candidate, somewhat, not a lot, but I can tell you that at the end of the day, that, and everybody's going to defend themselves, right? But I can tell you that I have done nothing improper, illegal, immoral, unethical in my time as police chief. Certainly, every decision I made, not everybody's going to be happy with, and that's just a fact of leadership and interacting with people. But when all of this is over and I know that my integrity is intact, no one here really knows that, right? Y'all aren't privy to maybe some of the daily ongoings, and all you can go on is my word, and only time will tell if I'm being honest with you, and the city's picked the right person if I'm that person. But I hold my head high and know that I'm still a man of integrity, and that has remained intact and it's untarnished. And I've learned a lot from my experience, right? I've learned that's what the experience does, is it teaches you things, and there are certainly ways that I will change the way that I do things in the future and to be a better leader. But the town, and obviously it's a question, right? I hate the fact that I even have to answer that, but you can't unring that bell. But I'm a dedicated law enforcement professional that takes this profession very seriously, and will do nothing to tarnish that badge.
Thank you. Our next question will be coming in from Bill Moss with the Hendersonville Lightning.
Hi, can y'all hear me?
We can.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Welcome to Hendersonville. The city of Hendersonville has not had a white police chief since, I think, the mid 1980s, and the city council and city leadership in general has been sensitive to both equal opportunity and fair, and what's regarded in the African American community as fair justice and law enforcement practices. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to the African American community in Clayton, and how that might translate to Hendersonville, please, sir?
Yeah, thank you, Bill. So, obviously I'm a white male, and so I don't have some of the same experiences that folks in the African American community have, and vice versa. And what I would say is I have a very varied background, right? I spent the first 11 years of my career in a city that's predominantly African American. Most of the people I work with are that, and that I learned a lot from that experience, right? That's something I would not have learned had I gone to had I started out in a different sort of a place. And so that really informed my approach to people. And what I've done, particularly with the African American community in Clayton is, I've built some real strong friendships with some of the folks in the religious community there. And I take a very upfront approach, right? I'm very open and honest with folks, and I tell them that, look, I don't understand, the feeling of systemic racism and what impact that has had on this community in this country, right? There's no way for me to sit there and say I understand what that is. In fact, I could sit there and say, well, I've never seen that, right? Because I'm not subject to that. But I am committed to making sure that the way that I act, the way that my police department acts, is sensitive to that, right? Restorative justice is important. Everybody should be treated with the same level of respect, regardless of their skin color or their sexual orientation or their political opinions, right? My wife tells me all the time when I head out to work, you gotta save them all, right? I don't choose who I provide service to, and that's part of my oath as a law enforcement officer, and my duty as a police chief is to make sure that my department understands that and operates in the same way, that we're going to treat everybody fair. We're not going to target individuals just because of what they look like, because that's unethical, and I'm a very big proponent of ethical policing, and when you start policing a community just because of the way they look or where they live or how much money they have, and you're not providing the same service to other segments of the community, then I think you're not doing justice to this profession and the responsibility that we have as law enforcement in the community.
Thank you. Next up, we will have a question from Laura with the Hendersonville Times News.
Good morning, and thank you for your time. Can you elaborate on what's been called philosophical differences with the town and the manager that you're currently on leave from?
Laura, I mean, there's really, it's very difficult for me to sort of say everything that's gone on, but this is basically, we're just not on the same page, and again, the direction of the leadership has changed. Their focus has changed, and I was hired 3.5 years ago to improve morale within the department and strengthen community relationships, and I have really focused my efforts in those areas. I think that I should have probably spent more time building relationships with some of the officials in town, and maybe I wouldn't be sitting in this situation. But I wanted to make sure that I did what I was hired to do, that I policed the way that I think policing should be done, and then I don't deviate from that or compromise any of my integrity in my office. And maybe that lends me to be somewhat more inflexible. I'm maybe guilty as charged there, but I think that I did the best for the men and women of the department and the citizens of Clayton. And again, I'm proud of what we've been able to accomplish in my time there.
Okay, so what would you say you have to offer Hendersonville if you're hired?
Well, I have a vast amount of experience, and I think that I bring a real sense of leadership to an organization. I've told other folks, I've been to Hendersonville before. My stepfather is from here. I still have family here. My siblings went to high school here, so I'm familiar with this area, but I'm committed to doing the best job that I can in leading men and women in law enforcement in the best way that I know how. And really my job as chief is to, when I leave here one day, when I retire, that I have left a department full of men and women that are policing ethically and justly and treating their citizens right, that they know how to do that. And really that's, at the end of the day, I want to be a citizen too. And I want to know that my police department is doing that. And I think that that's the best thing that I can offer is my commitment to do the best job that I can. I'm going to make mistakes. Everybody's going to make mistakes, but we're going to learn from those. I don't pledge to be perfect, and I don't think that anybody expects me to be perfect. But what you do expect, and what I commit to do, is to make the best decisions that I know how to do, given the input that I get, and we do the best thing that we can for the people of this, residents of this town, the folks that drive through it every day. And I'm a big believer in commitment. If I tell you I'm going to do something, that's what I'm going to give you my 100% doing.
Thank you. Pete Zamplis with the Tribune. We have a very short time. If you could ask a quick question, and then we'll move on to the community section.
Can you hear me? Regarding the deployment of officers for security of your home, what were the nature and extent of the threats that led you to do that? And then secondly, if you did it over again, would you have run that by the city administrators of Clayton?
Yeah, so I did run it by my boss in Clayton. And so this was stemming from our help with Raleigh Police Department with the riots that they had on Fayetteville Street. And I received a threat that a high-level blood gang member in Raleigh was paying $5,000 for someone to find my residence, the address to my house, and set my house on fire. That was a very specific directed threat. I took it very seriously, so much so that I sent my wife out of town for 4 days, which she's told me she's never going to do again. We didn't like, being in that situation, but the staff, when I brought this up to them, they were very much in agreement that they needed to provide some security. We were dealing with protests in the town of Clayton that weekend, several of them, as a matter of fact, and I think the manager agreed that his police chief needed to have his undivided attention at the matters at hand, and not worried whether or not someone's going to set his house on fire while he was at work, and particularly if his wife was inside. So that was the nature of the complaint. I felt confident enough after a few days that I wasn't going to continue to live that way, and wanted my wife back home. And so we ended things, and we've moved on since then. And my understanding is that that individual who made that allegation is now in prison. So not stemming from my specific case, but so that was the nature of the complaint.
Thank you. At this point in time, we will transition into our community submitted questions. Our first question comes from Laura Bannister. There will soon be a position in the city government whose responsibilities will include promotion of diversity and inclusion of people of color, as well as the LGBT community. How will you specifically address these needs in our area, given the growing and politically active minority population?
Diversity is very important. I made great strides when I came to Clayton, an agency that was predominantly white male. I hired a lot of diverse candidates, not for the sake of hiring diverse candidates, but for the skill sets that they bring to the table and the value that they add to an organization, and probably doubled the number of diverse candidates in the department during my time there. It's important that we continue to do the same thing for the city of Hendersonville. And again, there's a real value that people with differing backgrounds bring when they're solving problems, right? If everybody looked like me, we're going to solve the problems the same way. And that's not a good way to do that. We need input from people with different backgrounds and experiences in life. And I'm a big believer in that. And I've worked in organizations with a tremendous amount of diversity, both racially and sexually, and so this is not foreign to me. I'm very comfortable with that. I believe that it adds value to the organization, and it'll be a priority for me in this department. And I think my understanding is that the city or the department has lost some diverse candidates here recently. So there's probably a lot of work to be done in that area, and we're going to move forward to really promote diversity and target some of those individuals to recruit them into the organization.
Thank you. Our next question is a two-part question coming from Kristen Martin. How do you value the mental health of your officers and the community that they serve? Followed by, how do you view the relationship between your officers and staff and the homeless population?
So, mental well-being is important. So obviously it's important. It's important both in society, but within the department. This is a stressful job that affects individuals in different ways. Best case scenario, you're a cynical police officer, right? Worst case scenario, you get depression and you attempt suicide or commit suicide. And as a person, and as a leader, I have a charge to be responsible to take care of the men and women that work for me. And so that is their mental well-being as well. And I don't ever want to know that I failed to care for an officer's mental well-being that resulted in their suicide or their prematurely leaving the profession, right? So it's a high priority for me. I promote mental health training within organizations. In fact, I created a veteran-specific mental health response program years ago that has saved people's lives, and I take a lot of pride in that. And I think I'm not a trained mental health professional, but I understand the impacts that it has on society. And so a lot of the problems that we see in the community are probably more mental health related than they are crime related. And so we definitely put a lot of effort into improving that. With respect to the homeless population, that's sometimes can be a tricky question, right? Some people think they're fine with homeless people being in the community. Some people don't want to see them, and there's a fine line. It's not a crime to be homeless, and I think that there are resources that need to be put in place to help people find housing if that's what they want to find. But I certainly don't believe that you just round up all the homeless people and get them out of town. And I know that sometimes, particularly in places with a tourist population, that can be maybe some sort of a push. But again, I would just reiterate that it's not a crime to be homeless. And I think that most homeless people, if they had the choice, would probably rather not be homeless. So if there's ways that we can help connect them with resources to help them, then I think that's a problem solving effort that a police department should do.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Indiana Jackson. She asks, Chief Blake confirmed there would be no over-policing once the new building is finished. Can you guarantee this as well? And if so, how?
Well, I'm not sure what the building has to do with over policing necessarily, and I'm not exactly sure what you mean by over policing, but I think it's important for any police department to police the expectations of their community, right? You can't police the way in Hendersonville that you can in another city. It doesn't really work. So it's important that we meet the needs of and the expectations of our community. I'm not a zero tolerance sort of person, right? I don't believe that we can arrest our way out of problems. I'm not I've never been radar trained in my entire career, right? So I don't believe that we go around and write everybody tickets. It's not about numbers. It's about improving the lives of people in this city. And sometimes that's a conversation on the side of the road. Sometimes it is a ticket, but I certainly don't want to do anything that can be viewed as over policing the community. I don't think that I think people want a police department. They don't want a police force. And there's a distinction between the two of them.
Thank you. Our next question is from Harold Hellickson. He asks, how would you evaluate the need for possible anti-bias or prejudice training of the Hendersonville Police Force, the same for de-escalation training? If a need is recognized, what programs would you recommend be undertaken?
Well, I'm not sure that it's if there's a need to assess whether or not that training is needed. I think it's very clear that while I don't see that there's necessarily a problem within the department, but it's something that all of law enforcement needs. De-escalation is clearly one of the things that I wasn't taught de-escalation when I came on the job 26 years ago, right? That you did what the police told or else. And so we have to do a better job of responding to people. And a lot of the use of force that you've seen around the country that are captured on video, I think, is a lack of de-escalating the situation and that sort of what people term the contempt of cop approach. And I think that we have to do a better job. You really don't want to have to use force in this job, and the only way to do that is to use your words instead of using force. But force is a fact of doing this job, and so we have to do a better job with de-escalation and as with respect to racial sensitivity, racial bias training. There's a lot of programs out there. There's implicit bias training. There's confronting bias in law enforcement. I think to say at this point which program, if there is just a program, is best fitted for this department, I think it's really too early to say, and maybe it's multiple. I'm not sure, but I think that like I said earlier, there's no way for me to understand what being a Black man in America is like, right? I can't understand that. You can explain it to me and I can empathize with, but I don't truly understand it. And so we all need to take advantage of some of that training so we can have a better understanding of our community. So again, we are meeting the expectations of our community and not policing in just one way.
Both Beth Stang and Caroline Gunther submitted similar questions. We're summarizing here. What would be your approach to working with community groups, and how do you plan to engage and collaborate with the community?
I was very involved with the community in Clayton, and worked very much with the churches in town. I was part of a domestic violence shelter, board. But it's not just the sole responsibility of the police department to solve all the problems that are in the community. It is a community focus. We just happen to be the ones that get paid to enforce laws, but we cannot do this alone. I've learned that time and time again over the years, and I'm a big proponent of getting the public involved. Focusing on local resources that are better suited to solve issues, right? Handcuffs only do one thing, and that's usually no one likes that. So it's important that we involve the community. I'm very forward-facing. I've told people it's kind of in contrast. I'm somewhat of an introvert, but not shy and very out there in the public. I'm on social media a lot, and I post a lot of stuff with social media to promote the organization and the things that are going on. But I want to have partners in the community. I don't want this to be where we just kind of do what we think is best. I want to hear what the public says and meet those needs and partner with them. And I think that really is the only way to solve issues within any community.
So Blair, thank you for your time. We're out of time, so I'd like to thank our citizens and our media that participated in our 2 Zoom calls today. So hopefully you got some insight into our 2 candidates and got to see that we have 2 very qualified candidates for the next police chief for the city of Hendersonville. So just want to thank everybody. Thank you for your time and wish everybody a great day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.